Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you can hear me. Are those speakers working? Great, thank you. Welcome to this session on meeting retrofit demand by sort of how the supply chain needs to respond to the challenge of domestic retrofit. I'm David Pierpoint, I'm the Chief Executive of the Retrofit Academy, and my job is just to keep us to time and order today. We've got three very, very interesting speakers representing very different parts of the challenge and the solution. We've got about an hour and a quarter today, so we're going to hear three presentations, and then we're going to have around about half an hour at the end for Q&A. So I'm going to ask you, as we're going, and you have burning questions for each speaker, I'm going to ask you to keep those to the end, okay? So, in my opinion, this is probably the most important part of the challenge that we've tackled this week at Future Build. We looked already yesterday at the policy response and what sort of policies we need in order to drive a mass-scale market for retrofit. And we've also looked at the sort of generating demand, which always used to be the challenge. It's no longer the challenge. We're beyond the stage where we have to worry about demand. There's just this imperative for action now, which there's a general consensus needs to happen. So the challenge of decarbonising our housing stock still feels like we're at the bottom of a very, very tall mountain. So we get the demand and we have the policies which drive action. How do we, as a supply chain, respond to that? How do we decarbonise? How do we get to net zero by 2050 and decarbonise that housing stock when we already have a very stretched labour force, full to capacity, doing other things, and a feast and famine sort of industry? So the fact of the matter is that the current workforce is simply too small. Retrofit is expensive. It's too expensive yet for it to happen on a mass scale. The skilled individuals that we have are generally working in other sectors of the market. So there's some really big challenges here, but there's also some fantastic work that's going on at a relatively low-key level at the minute that we're going to hear about today, which should give us lots of grounds for enthusiasm and moving forward. So to consider these challenges, we have three speakers. The first speaker we're going to hear from is Sam. And forgive me, Sam, I should have asked this before. How do I pronounce your surname? Bolch. Bolch, okay. Sam Bolch, who's the Deputy Director at BEIS, responsible for home retrofit and energy-using products. And Sam's going to talk to us about many of the pilots that BEIS has commissioned and funded over the last 12 months. We're then going to hear from Simon Ayres, who's the Chief Executive of Trustmark. Trustmark, as most of you will know by now, is the now established quality mark for the domestic retrofit space, and there's been some amazing work done around that. And then to get the debate going, we have the ever-interesting Ian Hutchcroft, who's responsible for market development at Energy Sprong UK. And they're working with several different consortia and contractors around the country to develop really innovative solutions of all types around the Energy Sprong model, which we're going to hear about. So without further ado, we'll start with Sam. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I have a few slides that I'd like to sort of take you through at a bit of a canter today. So I'm as David said, I'm the Deputy Director for Home Retrofit and Energy Using Products in the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. What I've tried to do today is give a bit of an overview to start off about the kind of things that we're doing currently as government here, and the kind of pilots and demonstrations that we've initiated over the last sort of previous 12 or 18 months to help focus on building supply side capability and also capacity. So this is a bit of a scene setting slide. So clearly you're here, so you'll probably be familiar with our net zero emissions goal by 2050. Homes are a really significant part of UK greenhouse gas emissions currently. So 15% by direct consumption, 20% if you factor in electricity consumption into that. So there is a real challenge for us here in terms of how we improve the condition of our existing buildings. We've made good progress to date. There is still quite a long way to go, though. So in the clean growth strategy, and for the purposes of our carbon budgets, we've said that we need to at least reduce emissions by another fifth by 2032, which is the end of our carbon budget 5 period. In the clean growth strategy, we also set out an aspiration to upgrade as many homes as possible to EPC Band C by 2035. And this is helping sort of underpin a lot of what we do. This slide is just to give you a bit of an overview about what we've already said publicly and the things that we're kind of committed to doing. So in the clean growth strategy, we committed to at least equivalent levels of funding for home energy efficiency out to 2028. We made commitments about strengthening our private rented sector minimum energy efficiency standard regulation to EPC Band C. Apologies. And we also made similar commitments around what we would do with social housing. Alongside that, we've also done work looking at how we can improve the underpinning EPC framework and how we can look to build the market for energy efficiency, particularly focused on the owner-occupier market, which accounts for about 64% of all homes. We've also been focused on actually doing sort of practical things over the last sort of 18 months. So we launched Simple Energy Advice, which is an online, digitally led information service for consumers. It's really growing in demand. So over the last year, we've tripled the amount of usage that we're getting through that service, which shows there's genuine interest from consumers about the kind of things that they could start to do to their homes. We committed in the Green Finance Strategy, published last year, to consult on requirements for lenders to improve the energy performance of their of the homes that they lend to, helping householders. And we've also announced a number of demonstration and innovation competitions, which I'll be talking about a little more today. Finally, we've also, in terms of making sure that we're able to deliver high quality work, have announced that, PAS 2035, I think there's been a lot of industry work in developing this, and we have also been working with Simon, who will be speaking later, in terms of incorporating this into Trustmark to ensure the quality of installations is high. So these are the kind of the 3 demonstration projects that I thought I'd briefly talk about. So the first one is looking specifically at kind of local supply chain capability to deliver retrofit projects and to deliver them well. And it's, again, particularly focused on taking a whole house approach, and it's looking at overcoming barriers around fragmentation in the supply chain and making sure there's a kind of a seamless consumer offer on the other side. So far we've funded over £2.5 million to 6 organisations across England who are trying different approaches to try and build that supply chain capacity. The idea is this is a learning exercise, and we can use the learning from these pilots to help inform how we potentially scale up supply chain activity across the country. We have also announced a whole house retrofit innovation competition. We are aware, I think, as David mentioned, that retrofit is currently expensive, and we think we need to continue to reduce the costs of delivering deep retrofit and to do it to a high standard. And we think the best way in which to do that is going to be able to deliver projects at scale. So our whole house retrofit competition is supporting a number of social landlords, and more details will be announced shortly, to pilot deep retrofit on a number of their homes at scale. And so these are all the things that we're looking to try and achieve through these projects: cost reduction, energy demand reduction, demonstrating the ability to replicate these approaches at scale. And through this demonstration, we hope, again, to learn from what we're doing, and that will help inform potential future interventions in the market. Finally, finance. There's clearly, this is going to be a fairly expensive endeavour. getting as many homes as possible to EPC Band C by 2035, we estimate could cost up to 65 billion of investment, of capital investment. And we'll need to think about how we can help mobilise green finance in order to help support people to make those investments. We have launched a £5 million Green Home Finance competition. We've had a number of sort of interested parties, lenders and others looking to bid in to develop and test different kinds of green mortgage, green home finance products and to help deliver kind of seamless consumer offer as part of that. Again, this is all part of learning and demonstrating to help us understand what works so that we're then in a good place to then think about how we might scale things. So those are the kind of the main sort of demonstration projects I was going to talk about today. I'm happy to take kind of further questions around broader policy approach, but I'll hand over to our next speaker.
Just using the scroll down button. Yeah, that works. Yeah, okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to just talk to you briefly about Trustmark, what Trustmark is doing, and how it plugs into retrofit and quality. It's an interesting challenge we've got in front of us, I think, because nowhere have we seen the amount of work that is likely to come apart from things like the Industrial Revolution. You know, we are talking about scales of delivery that I don't think our construction and energy sectors have seen for a long, long time. Trustmark is a not-for-profit social enterprise. It is the government-endorsed quality scheme. So we have been mandated by government to deliver quality into initially the government-funded initiatives, but into a wider area with scheme providers. And our scheme providers are people like FMB, NIC, those sorts of organisations. It's worth remembering, though, that the reason we're talking about quality now is that we actually haven't delivered brilliant quality in the past. All right, you know, there have been lots of initiatives where there have been challenges, where there have been issues. There has been a general acceptance that near enough is good enough. Trustmark's view on this has to stop. You know, as a consumer, you should be able to, regardless of tenure, regardless of who's funding it, the work you should get delivered to your property should actually be right, it should be correct, and if something is wrong, it should be put right. And that's a fundamental issue that I think we have to crack. The way Trustmark operates is fairly simple. We have a license with BAYS. We then sub-license or have another form of a license that goes down to a scheme provider. The scheme provider has a license with a business, and the business then delivers to a consumer. In those, there's something called a framework. The framework determines how a scheme provider will act, how it will respond, and how it will register businesses. So it's things like background checking. It has to ensure that a business will provide a minimum of 2 years financial protection, so if something goes wrong. There are standards to be recognised. It recognises that as an industry, it should be compliant with standards that are enforced for those areas. And that's across the board. But also importantly, there is now a code of conduct. That code of conduct is something that a business must adhere to. Dare I say, I've been sort of in the energy and construction sector a long time. Complaints from serious matters of failing of products and services to dirty footprints across carpets. They're all hugely important when it comes to building trust, to delivering choice, and making sure that somebody actually as a consumer, if you are making that choice, that you get what you expect. And the last one is, as a consumer, well, what do I get from this? What does Trustmark deliver? So there is now a charter, and that charter starts to support what you can expect from a Trustmark business through to a Trustmark scheme provider, back to Trustmark. And to support that, we now have an ombudsman in play as well. So Trustmark has put an ombudsman in the backstop to make sure that you are protected all through that route. A liability chain that we will stand by. Trustmark's new form came about, though, probably from the 2016 review. I won't spend too long talking about it. The evidence is up there. Really, there were some challenges over energy efficiency work. From that, there had been a government review with industry, something called Each Home Counts. From that, we then moved to a position where we realised that quality and some sort of audit and compliance requirements were coming into play. From that sort of whole process, we ended up really as Trustmark as it is today, under its new brand, and working now with government to deliver a much improved level of quality. We have a couple of things here. So the normal question is, well, actually, if I use somebody from Trustmark or I register with Trustmark, what does it bring? It brings compliance and enforcement. We are one of only 2 organisations that have embedded trading standards into our process. So we have trading standards officers that will look at brand misuse, mis-selling, contract abuse, so that we have some teeth, that we have something that we can deliver if something goes wrong. We have sanctions, we have risk-based inspections. We vet and validate the businesses that come through this process. And last year we were also written into a regulatory role around the energy company obligation, which is about £640 million a year being pushed towards fuel poverty. We're also expecting a transition to take place now as we move to the new standards, something called PAS 2035. I'm not going to spend the next 3.5 hours telling you about PAS 2035, but it is actually now developing and delivering a whole house approach. We are moving away from just changing a single measure to looking at how do we deliver multiple measures that improve the health of somebody's property, the ability for them to be in warmth, the ability for them to have good ventilation and air quality, and actually reduce their cost overall. They all have to come together and be delivered. But some sort of bits really around the market and the opportunity. Through an organisation we're working with, they did some reviews of EPCs. And if you look at that EPC, and I know the arguments about EPCs will continue for a long time, but it is a baseline that we have today. We have a long way to go to get all of that property to a C level. What we mustn't forget, that creates its own challenges. So net zero, when you start talking about it in terms of homes, the stats from last week show we have 28.3 million homes. Of that, the estimate is 24 million of those will need retrofitting in 30 years. Put it in context, 2,200 homes per day, every day for the next 30 years. Average cost, £25,000 probably, maybe more, depending on what you're doing. The market that it will create, the scale that it will create is mind-blowing. You know, if you've got a poor calculator, you'll find you won't have enough zeros on there to actually work it out. To deliver that, though, we also need a workforce, a supply chain. We need products, we need people. Estimated that we are probably circa 300,000 tradespeople short to deliver this target. Why is that important when it comes to quality? Well, what we historically know is when you have a higher demand than you have a supply chain, you will start to see quality maybe slip. You will see detriment to consumers start to happen. So we have to ensure that that's protected all through that process. It's massively important that we deliver the right level of quality at the right standard, to make retrofit happen. PAS is an interesting one. I'm quite happy to talk to people outside of this if they want to talk about the PAS, but it is important because it is driving the supply chain to improve standards. Improved standards will help us succeed in this massive, massive task we have. And we will have a transition. Like all these things, to take a workforce from here to here, you can't do overnight. So there's an 18 months to a 2-year transition for people to move to a point where they will think of whole house rather than individual measures. But interestingly, when we talk about this market, there are a number of things in place. So Trustmark has its new guys, it's now up and running. We have a data warehouse, which I'll talk a little about in a minute, because the data warehouse will requirement, lodgement of the work into it so that we can have an audit trail, we have a compliance trail, and we have visibility of what was done, when it was done, how it was done, and who did it. So there is now this ability to start going back to get corrective actions taken if it's been done wrong. But when you start thinking about all the challenges that go with that, so we've talked about the supply chain, we've talked about then funding. Sam talked a little bit about there, you know, the funders and the financiers are looking at ways to bring green loans, green mortgages, you know, everything in that they can do so. And they have to do that. You know, you've got to get to a point where actually a consumer isn't then funding huge amounts more money to deliver something which is an overall target. So there are some great elements going through at the moment. Strategic partners, established tools. Sort of the challenge to you all would be, try to go on the internet at the moment and find an end-to-end solution that will allow you to work through and deliver a retrofit program. So something where you start with your existing home, you go through, you make the adaptations, and actually you want to include a kitchen, a bathroom, all those different areas. You want to be able to fund it. And the interesting one will be if you live in an old thatched 500-year-old cottage, getting that to a band C is going to be a challenge. So you need to think of other ways as well. So we need to build those in. So that you then have to look at the delivery and the supply. You want the confidence in the quality, the delivery of that, through that process. Part of Each Home Counts recognise that we do need a way of using a data warehouse, a store, something that would allow the lodgement of work so that we could see how it was done and how it was achieved. There will be a number of challenges that will come back around GDPR and all these things which we're covering, but you have to have some visibility. You know, this can cover all types of tenure of property. It can cover owner-occupied, it can cover rental property. You know, it's all about understanding that we have this data which allows us to drive the audit and compliance and the quality. And just to give you a scope of what that data warehouse could look like, and I'll bring it all up together. We have the ability here to tie in together the work completed. We have the ability to look at the EPC assessments, what consumer protection is in play, how that's being delivered, the funding and finance, the building regulation areas. You then build in the rental sector, health. I can't remember the exact figures, but there are, is it 42p in the pound that can be saved on the health service budget, for property that is updated to keep somebody in their own homes. So, what we may spend on updating our properties can be saved in other areas. We have the home security. Everyone will see now that smart homes is coming. We control our homes from our phones. We control our homes from so many different devices, from, dare I say, things that you talk to in your home. So that we have to be mindful of all these. But also, we have to be able to get access back to a property owner to look at what's been completed, when it's been completed, and how we move that forward. Now, you may ask, why is this linked to quality? Well, out of this, behind it, the data warehouse, is this compliance program, because compliance will drive quality. So this is actually taking all the different levels of a retrofit. So you just don't lodge something at the end, you lodge the assessment, the design, the delivery, the verification, and one of the really important things you have to do also these days is know that you've got a performance requirement there. So actually, if you're promised something that will be delivered, that you will actually also see that being delivered. And that links out to then other systems, other schemes, massively important. That all links into, dare I say, a sausage machine. It's a risk engine. The risk engine will look at all the different data, all the different information, and it will start allowing Trustmark to focus where we need to for compliance and quality reasons. So no more sort of shotgun style approach just because you do a certain role. It will target defined functions, and we're running a pilot at the moment that starts to identify all those different areas. So it's building as we move forward. The whole of Trustmark is about delivering quality. It's about giving a consumer choice. It's about giving a business the opportunity to grow and deliver quality work. And overall, we want to deliver really through Trustmark and its associated partners and systems, retrofit to a level of quality that we can all be proud of. That's me. Thank you.
Hi.
You do need to click through the video. On here? No, you need to click on this video itself, the screen.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Hi, everyone. So my name's Ian Hutchcroft. I'm with Energy Sprong UK. For those of you who haven't heard of Energy Sprong before, very briefly, Energy Sprong means energy leap in Dutch. And it's the name that's been given by the Dutch government-initiated approach to delivering net zero retrofit of homes at scale, thousands and tens of thousands. It started in 2010 in the Netherlands when the Dutch government realized they had a problem, which actually is the same problem that every country in Europe has. And that problem is that we need that net zero energy housing stock. The current ways that we do that don't get us to net zero. They cost a lot of money, and that price isn't coming down, and the taxpayer can't pay for it. So we need a new solution. So the Dutch, very kindly, have worked out how to do this, and we have given ourselves the mission in Energy Sprong UK of adapting that experience for the UK market and growing a volume market and a volume supply chain to be able to deliver this. And I'll go through how this works a little bit, but I'll focus particularly on the supply chain needs. So we are 100% publicly funded. We're independent. We're funded by a EU-funded program over the next 3 years to work across the whole of the UK. And we're funded by the Mayor of London, delivering his Retrofit Accelerator Homes program here in London. So, what sort of supply chain do we need? We need a supply chain that can do this. An industrialized supply chain, digitized supply chain, laser measuring a property, millions of data points, taking that back to a factory, making panels that are bespoke for that property. You leave home to go to work in the morning. The retrofit guys turn up with your kit, all the M&E, the heating, the battery, thermal store, all in a box. Very simple job, just to connect it to the existing electric and plumbing. Off the back of a lorry, craned in, straight on site, a warm roof, with PV on the facade, final rainproof covering, and generating energy for the property. Windows and doors already installed in the panel. A fabric-first approach that delivers super levels of insulation. And that's what you come home to in the evening. 1 day on site, a net zero energy home, guaranteed actual performance, actual comfort for a low bill, low energy bill and a low maintenance bill, guaranteed long term. That's how we deliver a net zero energy housing stock. And that's the supply chain we need to grow to do that. The Dutch have done it. They've got an industry digitized, industrialized, delivering that in thousands and thousands of retrofits and new builds every year, and their delivery rates are growing. The sort of supply chain we need is a bit like the automotive industry, an industry that's gone from producing this in the 1970s to producing this today. Even if this is a petrol engine, It's over 100% more efficient than this one. It's a lot safer. It's much more desirable. This is the key. We have to make this very desirable, an aspirational product. The killer fact about it, though, is that it's significantly cheaper in real terms than this car was. And we need to do this with retrofit as well. We need an industry that can turn a home like this, built in a field, to a home like this, with the retrofit built in a factory, wrapped around the property. An old home that's better than a new home, or current building regs new home. It's guaranteed to be warm and comfortable every day. The energy bill and the maintenance bill is guaranteed to be affordable and low long term. And those guaranteed savings are what pay for the capital works over time. It's built in a factory, and those costs decrease over time. As volume increases, costs decrease. And it's guaranteed to be net zero energy, which means it's nearly net zero carbon, and it will be when the grid fully decarbonises. There's no connection to gas in an energy-strong home. It's electric only. This is the supply chain that we've got today, largely, in retrofit. It's very craft-based. It's very trades-based. It's very on-site. And we can't deliver 28 million net zero homes in a decade or two by those sort of approaches. That's why we need an industrialized approach. The jobs in retrofit tomorrow need to be in factories, not on site in the field, or a minimal on site in the field. We need an industry that looks a bit more like this, with robotized production lines, using that digitized survey information, producing fabric solutions that come off the production line that are bespoke for each individual property. And we also need M&E solutions, the heating, hot water, all put in a box. This is a box that's designed to fit in the roof where a Velux would go. It's an air source-based system. It's got a battery in it, it's got the controls in it, the smart monitoring in it, as well as the thermal store and the battery store. So in the UK, we're a bit behind the Netherlands, but we have started. We've done this, and there's a supply chain that's responding to this. We started in 2018 with the first 10 homes, the first prototype, if you like, delivered in Nottingham. Nottingham City Homes have now got a contract to do 155. Some of those were delivered in 2019, as well as projects in Essex and in Devon with 4 landlords. And this year, we've got a pipeline of over 1,000 homes. And the interesting thing is that these were part funded by EU grant. These are part funded by some of the whole house retrofit funding that Sam mentioned. Many of these are self-funded by the landlord 100%. They're a sweet spot in the stock where the landlord can spend quite a lot of money on them because they've got to do something with them. But interestingly, landlords are self-funding to do this. So that's why we're building this growth curve, and we need, the classic chicken and egg in sector development is that you need the demand to generate the supply, but you don't get the demand until the supply and the product is right. And we're trying to break that chicken and egg conundrum by growing this demand and supporting the supply chain to respond to that demand. And that's what we as market development teams do. There are 5 Energy Strong market development teams in Europe at the moment. We're one of them. This is all of us last year. And the UK team are kind of spread about in there. There's not that many of us compared to the Dutch and the German teams. Because as well as the EU funding that we've got, their governments are funding them to be the market catalysts to get this industry moving and out of the gates. So the sort of stuff that we do is we operate in this space here. We work with landlords to generate that demand. We support the supply chain to help them understand the market potential and the technical solutions that they need to adopt to access that market. And we work with people like Sam and his colleagues in government to help explain to them what they need to do in terms of initial funding, short-term innovation investment, from the public sector to get this supply chain off the runway, and what we need in terms of the low-cost or no-cost policy tweaks to make this easy to do. So that's making the market. So these are the sort of archetypes that we've delivered so far in the UK. These were the first ones in Nottingham. This was the one in Essex for moat homes. This is the one that will be finishing in a couple of weeks' time in Exeter. And the pipeline, that 1,000 pipeline for next year, we've got new archetypes in there, many of which are blocks of flats. So we've just launched a design competition, 6 design competitions actually. It was competitively, it was a competition. We had many more bidders than the 6 that we've awarded to. And we've awarded a consortium of businesses for each of a different set of problems or challenges. So one is the new archetype of a block of flats, retrofit that to net zero. The second is retrofit of a block of flats, but put new flats on the top of it, all to net zero. And the third one isn't buildings, it's about monitoring and billing solutions, so it's hardware and software as well. So we've got over 30 companies that are part of the consortiums that are now working on those, and it's kind of free money. You don't get this sort of investment very often as a business. It's free money to go away, work with your partners, and think about the solutions you need to develop and put in place to be able to respond to the tenders for these archetypes that are going to be coming out later this year to get themselves tender ready. And we found that to be really effective. You know, there's a really good response from the supply chain to that. The other thing that we need to grow a supply chain is that the supply chain's customers need a business case that works. A business case actually that pays for the product itself by the value of the new income and the savings on existing budgets that the retrofit delivers. So what this is here is a business case trifle. It's a layered trifle which shows what the value of the net zero retrofit delivers to the building owner. These 2 brown layers of the trifle are the savings on the existing maintenance and repairs budget for the property. This is the value of taking gas out of the property, so you don't have to service the boiler, you don't have to do gas safe checks. This is the value of, in this case, it was the RHI actually. It was a communal ground source system, so the RHI is pretty neat for that at the moment. In the future, it could be Eco4, it could be time of use tariffs. And this green top lime jelly bit of the trifle is the value of the income that is paid from the tenant to the building owner as a comfort plan charge. This is the business case for the tenant. And I'm talking about social housing here because we're using social housing as the launching market to grow the supply chain, to develop products that are cost effective that then can be offered to privately owned properties in time. So this is what the tenant was paying before, less than what SAP says they should be paying because this is a vulnerable household. They haven't got money to spend. So that's what they're actually spending at the moment, not what SAP says they should be. This is after the retrofit. They get a guaranteed cost saving. They spend less money, but they get a guarantee that they're warm, they've got enough hot water and enough plug power every day of the year. The difference is that all goes to the utility. Afterwards, only a little bit goes to the utility. Most of it's standing charge, actually. This goes to the landlord. But they get a guarantee that that combined price will give them that level of comfort. The third thing we need in a business case that works is we need to get a financial director of our supply chain companies and our landlords really excited. So this is the point where we reach a tipping point in our engagement with social landlords. So we go to the board and we've done all this business case analysis on real properties with real data, and we show that if you just carry on maintaining this property as you plan to do over the next 30 years, you'll have a net present value, in this case, of 43k. That's the value, the money that you make out of your business by doing that. After the Energy Sprong retrofit, you make £68,000 of net present value out of it. And that's with the cost of financing, the indexing, all those costs of delivering a retrofit and guaranteeing its performance over 30 years. And it's at that point that the finance director goes, why are you only coming to me for a pilot of 50 homes? We should do this to our whole stock, shouldn't we? Yeah, definitely you should do this to the whole stock, but not right now, because we haven't got a supply chain to deliver it right now. We need to start with smaller steps, engage and partner with the supply chain, help them to grow over time, and help this industry get off the runway and deliver at a price point which pays for itself with no government investment in it. That's the point that the Dutch government have reached already, and that's the point that we're aiming to get to. We've got a pipeline of 1,000 for this year, and we've done just over 100 so far. We think we probably need to get to about 10,000 homes to get to that takeoff level. Another really important thing to think about in terms of the business case for net zero retrofit is who pays for it. So the Energy Sprong approach does not shake any magic money trees. The approach is explicitly targeted at using money that is already being spent. I explained to you that some of the saving goes from the tenant to the landlord. Tenants currently are spending £4.2 billion a year, and many of them are cold for that. At the same time, landlords are spending £5.2 billion a year as an industry to keep the properties pretty much the same as they are today. So what the Energy Sprong approach does is take each year some of this annual recurring investment and turns it into capital to deliver net zero that delivers savings against these two expenditure lines every year into the future. So the money's already there. That's the finance for delivering net zero to reduce our country's carbon emissions by 20%. It's there already. We just need to unlock it. The only reason we need government money is that unlocking, very time limited. This is how the business model works in a little bit more detail. So rent gets paid to the housing provider, energy bill to the utility. That's how it works now. In the future, rent still goes to the housing provider, but also the comfort plan charge goes from the tenant to the housing provider. They use that income to finance the retrofit. There's an internal rate of return there, and there is a small amount that still leaks out to the utility because the properties are still connected to the grid. They're not fully autonomous. Sometimes they export, sometimes they import. But batteries and thermal storage really minimize the amount of export of energy from the property and minimize import. Alongside that, the tenant gets this promise. Guaranteed warm rooms, guaranteed enough hot water every day, guaranteed amount of plug power, and the home looks great and feels great, all for a fixed monthly cost. This is our map of the runway. This is how we get this industry to take off and get to this self-financing level. We start off here with our original 200 volume of homes. Landlords, this is the trifle. The orange is the trifle of the business case. Landlords have put in this, EU funding's put in that. Over time, we're increasing volume and we're decreasing costs. So we are beginning to show that already. Where the gap is and where the ask of government is to put the funding in here that helps this runway continue to grow in terms of volume. The problem with the grant schemes that we've got at the moment is that they're very pilot-based and they're very stop-start. So after the whole house retrofit scheme that Sam mentioned, after those projects are finished, the supply chain don't know that there's any more coming. It stops then. We hope government will start something up, but actually we don't want stop-start. It's not a very good way to get something off the ground by starting and then stopping and then starting and then stopping and then starting and then stopping again. You know, we need a long runway over a period of 5 to 7 years, we reckon, of consistent investment, tapering investment. Volume does drive innovation, and it does drive cost reduction. This is what we've seen in the Netherlands. So installing measures in a property, the traditional craft-based way, costs about 25k. The first Energiesprong prototypes, they put all those bits in a box in a factory and delivered it to site. Got the cost down to 17k. Generation 2 energy module, a bit more sophisticated, did a bit more than just taking them out of putting them all in a box. It took each component out of its box and put them together in a different way and got the cost down to 11k, and that's kind of where they are at the moment with that energy module. They reckon when they're doing 10,000 a year, it'll be 5k. And if you think that energy module is a hell of a lot simpler than an internal combustion engine, the Fiat 1 litre petrol internal combustion engine costs £650 to make. So there is a lot of opportunity for cost reduction through industrialisation to be had. I'm coming to the end. Very quick comparison of the particular challenge that we've got in the UK compared to other countries. So first of all, we have the most energy inefficient housing stock in the country. Therefore, to get them to net zero, we have to do more to them. Doing more to them costs more than in other countries. Second thing, governments in the Netherlands and Germany, they're already investing in this runway approach, not stop-start, but if you do a net zero retrofit in the Netherlands, you get 8k as a grant. No questions, you get 8k. In Germany, if you're delivering net zero to a house, 40% of it is grant. No questions asked, long term. You don't have to do it today, you can do it tomorrow or the next year. It's not going to stop and start. The value in the UK at the moment, well, I've put about 2k there. That might be the value of the Eco 3. Air source, RHI for air source could give you a bit more than that, but it's not enough, basically. Another key thing, if you're thinking about a housing owner, whether they're a landlord or an owner-occupier or private landlord, in the Netherlands, they can borrow money to do retrofit at less than 1.5%. In Germany, it's half that. It's 0.75%. But in the country with the world-leading finance sector, investment that is literally safe as houses, social landlords typically borrow money at 2 to 4%. Every 1% on the cost of capital adds £5,000 to the capital cost of delivering the net zero retrofit. In addition, we've got the cheapest energy prices, electricity and gas. That means if you're financing out the savings, we've got less to play with. So our ask of government is this. We need government to do for housing retrofit what it did for offshore wind, which was over a period of 5 to 7 years. It guaranteed that government would buy electricity from offshore wind in increasing volume at a decreasing unit cost. That's what we need for retrofit. We think it's only about £250 million, a lot less than the £3.8 billion social housing decarbonisation fund that was in the Conservative Party manifesto. VAT, if we're using social landlords as a launching market, half of them don't pay VAT and the other half do. That's 20% additional cost. If you're buying rock wool, it's 5% VAT. If you put it in an integrated panel built in a factory, you pay 20% on all of that. Government could really help us by offsetting that madness. The comfort plan, the payment from the tenant to the landlord, we could do it. We could do it through a service plan, we can do it through a separate agreement. That's what we've done on projects to date. We could reduce the cost of doing that and the complexity of doing that for tenants and landlord just by enabling the landlord to connect it as one payment. Financing I talked about, some low-cost capital would be really great here, some patient low-cost capital. In London, the Mayor of London has got the Mayor's Energy Efficiency Fund. Over 18 years, it can provide capital about 1%, I think, at the moment. A lot cheaper than market rates. Salix is 0% for public buildings. Why not have that for domestic retrofit. It makes a big difference. And finally, let's start this with the end in mind. The end is net zero. So let's say that. Let's set that as a policy, clear policy statement. All our homes will be net zero. That gives clarity to the supply chain, helps to give them confidence to invest in the innovation required to industrialise and get to net zero. EPCC, as an interim measure on its own, is very, very counterproductive. It pushes people to do interim measures, and it risks locking out energy-saving, cost-effective energy-saving measures to get to net zero in the long run. So that's me. That's our ask of government, and let's have a good discussion.
Thought-provoking, Ian. I think that sets the scene very nicely for questions from the floor. But we've really heard there about the many things that are happening in quite a low-key way. I'm sure some of you are hearing about some of these things for the first time today. They're very exciting, very dynamic, and there's lots going on. So who wants to be brave and go first with questions? We have a mic available. We have a question.
Andrew Ross from Global Garden. I work on the bond market and green finance. This is exactly the arena that Mark Carney is describing as suitable for investment.
I'm sorry, we can't hear what you're saying. Would you hold the microphone close?
I'm Andrew Ross from Global Garden. I work on the bond market. I'm Andrew Ross. I work on the bond market. Here we go. And in particular, the focus that Mark Carney is describing in the whole economy transition, which is investment of 1 trillion in the UK by 2030. It's 100 trillion globally. The key here is how to construct municipal green bonds that deliver this money into a portfolio of projects that meet the very minimum of investment on the bond market, which is 100 million. It's the minimum. So how do you bring a portfolio together that would engage with all the banks who are now compelled to put this scale of money into this arena?
It's a good question. We, as part of our green finance strategy that we published last year in conjunction with Treasury, we are continuing to kind of engage with the sector on the kind of the role of green bonds. I think I would agree with the sentiment of the question that a lot of this is around building a portfolio, that we're talking about lots and lots of quite small investments here. And being able to get to a point where you would be able to kind of securitize those potentially is important. This is part of the reason why we're looking to work with lenders themselves, and our Green Home Finance Innovation Competition is starting to develop sort of modalities for lending that should potentially lend themselves to securitization if successful in the long run. So yes, I think I agree with the kind of the sentiment, and we're looking to try and move in that general direction.
I think it's a great question. I think what you and your colleagues in the city would want is 10,000 of these having been done, with all those money flows running, you know, all those, this bit here, proven, working, repeated payments, proven, working over time. I think if we could show the city that we've done it in 10,000 homes, a number of different archetypes, those savings are all proven, that's when your guys get interested. And that's why, to get 10,000, we need government to help us do that. I think the initial innovation investment to get us from a few hundred net zero retrofit homes up to that 10,000 level. The second thing I think we need to do is aggregate that demand. And we have started to aggregate that demand. We've got about 20 landlords across the country that are in that 1,000 pipeline, or they'll be in the next phase of that pipeline. So what we're beginning to procure is an aggregated solution for archetypes, not for landlords, but for archetypes, and a partnership between the supply chain and the landlords that starts off on the research and development and prototyping journey on doing 1s and 2s and 3s in archetypes. But once that's developed and proven, it then can roll out, not just in one landlord, but in many others. So we've begun to aggregate that together.
I think, is that working? Yeah. Yeah, I think I sit on the Green Finance Institute, which came out of the Green Finance Task Force. So they have currently about 20 demonstrators that they are working on to look at really how funding and finance can be rolled out through a much wider sector. And I think we mustn't forget, if we take our housing stock, which is just over 28 million, we have about 3.8 million in social housing, 6.2 million in private rental. The remainder are owner-occupied. And there are, of that, I think, that owner-occupied about 75% where there are mortgages or some sort of financing. So the task is much wider than just looking at one sector. It has to be a global approach to our housing stock. That has lots of different things that we have to do with it. But I'm happy to talk outside of this. But it is happening. It's just got to happen at some pace and some speed.
You happy with that, Andrew? You were shaking your head at one point. Did you want?
The role of municipals here, connecting together sets of local authorities, like the whole of London, through the UK Municipal Bond Agency, to gather together the complete capital of London, and then multiply that across all the cities of the UK. Then you've got an investable model at scale.
Great, we've got a winner then. Next question.
Hi, I'm Ellie Voke. I work in social housing procurement. And I've got two questions for Energiesprong. How does it work with sort of local vernacular of buildings and listed buildings? And also, what innovations are you hoping to get from the monitoring and billing competition?
Good question. Questions. So, let's look at the UK housing stock. About that. About 50 to 60% of it, right in the middle, is boxy. It's post-1919, it's pretty boxy, and that's a big enough volume to do Energiesprong right now. So we're focusing on that 50 to 60% because it's the entry market, it's the place. Let's not start at the most difficult place, let's start at the easiest place. So on the fringes of that distribution are, on the left-hand side, as I'm looking at it, I would say there are those Victorian, Edwardian, pre-1919 properties that you wouldn't really ever want to wrap up like that. Maybe in time, we'll be 3D printing a facade that looks just like it did before, but I don't think we're quite there yet. So the solutions in those properties might still be electrification, take the gas boiler out and put a heat pump in. To enable that to be cost effective, you've got to get the fabric right. So it could be something like a Qbot robot spraying insulated foam under a suspended timber floor, and they've got a stand just over there. It might be internal wall insulation, again 3D laser measured, digitized, cut in a factory, installed at a limited time on site, and it might be some PV on the roof. It might even be a new roof with a new room in it and a dormer window to help the business model work. At the other end of that 50 to 60% spectrum, we've got things like high-rise. I think we can, as a country, we can develop a really good solution for high-rise that's net zero and warm and affordable and comfortable, and the market's ripe for it right now. We just need to crack on and do that R&D, and we haven't got there yet. So that was the first question, and the second question was monitoring and billing, the competition that we'd let. So the monitoring and billing solution that we're looking for is the actual performance being measured in pretty cheap kit that's available today, but it all going into an app-based solution that the tenant can see on their phone, the tenant can see on a screen in their home, that can all be updated over time. It's not hardware dependent, it's all done through software. The hardware can be changed over time, but the software solution still endures. And that actually feeds into the billing of the comfort plan charge as well. So you could put your smart card or your debit card on the screen and pay your comfort plan charge if you're on a prepayment meter. And some of that goes to the landlord and some of that goes to the utility company in a really easy to manage way.
Okay, thank you. The next question mustn't be focused on energy sprung, okay? So if it is, your next question was going to be, I want to think about this slightly more broadly. So does anyone have any questions around sort of skills and education and how we create the kind of workforce that Ian was saying we need, given that most universities and colleges aren't already training people in retrofit at all? In fact, I think I've just asked a question. So could I ask, particularly you two, what do we need from the education establishment in order to solve that problem?
It's probably a debate that we could talk about all day, I'm afraid, but I will try to limit my views on it. When we talk about the sets of skills that are going to be needed, and I think we all agree they will be a wide and varied set of skills. If you take our housing stock, which we've just been talking around, which has all these variations, there is lots of traditional work, which is traditional skills. So the plumber, the heating engineer, the electrician, the builder, the carpenter will still have a part to play. But alongside that, as Ian's been talking about quite rightly, there is now the requirement for us to digitize, modernize, and do through really mass production, yet the availability of some of these areas. I use an interesting one. So I use my sons, because my sons are two mechanical design engineers, one very mathematical, the other very practical. The practical one now has seen this coming, looks at climate change, and is really very much focusing about how does he retrain at 25 years old, to become part of this future. So we have to look, when we talk about training and education, across the whole spectrum. We have to lose the concept of just talking about apprenticeships, and we have to look at all those capabilities and skills across a very wide area. But we've also got to make sure that we're delivering that in the right way. So there are key aspects to delivery now around things around retrofit that have to be picked up. Quality sits within this. The ability for somebody to understand the process. And I think one of the real things we have to drive is this almost desire for professionalism to come back into some of those trades, across all the trades, to make those things happen. And I'm sort of happy to carry on talking, but I'll stop at that point.
I think I would agree with a lot of what Simon said. The kind of trajectory that we need to see here involves lots of work happening at scale over the 2020s. A lot of this is going to be about reskilling and upskilling the existing supply chain in order to make sure that they have the capability to respond. There is already a whole RMI supply chain, £25 billion worth of investment every year in sort of home improvement, renovation, repair. And a lot of this is going to be about making sure that they have the additional knowledge, additional skills to be able to do work to a high quality. So when they're fitting internal wall insulation, that they pay extra detail to the detailing around windows and things like that. And quality standards and sort of established processes for doing those will be really important. We're also looking at about how you bring together the right skills here as well. So our supply chain pilots are looking at the issue that there's currently quite a fragmented supply chain. Lots of people know bits about their specific things. To do whole house retrofit, we're going to have to bring those skills together in a kind of a complementary way. And that's where the retrofit coordinator can play a really critical role in terms of ensuring work's done well and done appropriately.
Thank you very much. I like the idea of a whole house retrofit apprenticeship. That seems like a a sensible idea to me. That's one we'll have to look at. Any more questions? Yes, here, please. Oh, Julian first, then, yeah. You next.
Hi there, Julian Boss from BRE. It's about 2,300 homes a day between now and 2050 that need whole house retrofit. How many people do you think that requires in terms of retrofit coordinators and other people, whether in factories doing energy strong or doing bespoke retrofit?
I don't know, but I think industrialization is part of the answer. And it's part of the answer to the last question as well. I think, take the automotive industry and turn it back to pre-Henry Ford. So you've got people in little garages taking a block of metal and turning it into a car. The skills required for that are phenomenal. Lathe work and high-end engineering. Let's not try and start with the retrofit industry at that pre-Henry Ford level. Let's think of Jaguar Land Rover, which has its own apprenticeship scheme. It trains its own workers. It knows what its workers need to do. If you put as much of the skill set in the factory as you can, you make the skills agenda a lot easier. You make each person's work massively more productive than doing it on site. So I think the industrialization of this is critical to that skills agenda and the labour agenda as well. I don't think we've got enough people, particularly post-Brexit, to go around and use the craft approaches that we're using to date on site. It'll be appropriate in some archetypes for some time, but I think the longer-term answer, at least in part, at least a significant part, it's got to be doing this in factories and get smart.
Okay. I guess I've got a slightly different angle on this one, which would be it's horses for courses in a way. We have just under 1 million SME businesses operating at the moment. Of those million businesses, they are doing all the work that we have done day to day, plus they're building around 170,000 new homes. We know government want to see 300,000 new homes built. Yeah, so that will be through some of the new measures that will come and through industrialization. But we also have to look at probably this new number of businesses and people, and I'm only using the estimate here, but the estimate's based on the numbers we've been given are about 300,000 new tradespeople within this next period of time. However, there is, and as Ian said earlier, what we can't do is do this hockey stick approach, because it will probably take 5 years to train these new people. And in 5 years, our targets are going to go from 2,200 a day to multiples of thousands per day. So there is a real conundrum that we have to face. But across the board, whether it's through industrialization or whether it's through dealing with those homes that already exist, we have a massive task and a massive need to bring new trades, new thinking into the system.
Okay, thank you. Just Sam?
I think I'd echo points of the last speakers. I think I agree. I think a government's role here is to make sure that we have the kind of the market framework right that can allow innovation and allow industrialization and modern methods of construction where that works or where is most appropriate. But I think we also need to think about kind of different archetypes will require different solutions. Some of that might be 3D printing, off-site production. Some of it might be around kind of upskilling existing trades. I think it's clear, yes, we know already from our local supply chain pilots that they are struggling to be able to access sort of high quality tradespeople to do this work. So it's clear that we're going to need to continue to build the market and grow the supply chain. What we will need to do is make sure we've got kind of clarity, and we're providing industry with clarity and certainty so that they can invest in reskilling and retraining and have confidence that there is going to be a market there that they can service.
Thank you very much. We're going to take one more question. Maybe have time for one more.
Yeah, hi, it's Neil Bowles from Beer Surveying. Sam, can you give us some reassurance that the government will use the new HUG scheme to support the revised specifications past 2035, for example?
So I think you're referring to sort of details in the manifesto. So there's clearly a limit to what I can say at the moment. This will obviously be a matter for the Chancellor because it's a fiscal proposal. The detailed design of the schemes is still TBC. We're still working through them. I think what we will look to do is make sure that we're leveraging existing schemes where we can, and I think overall we will want to ensure there's a high quality of work undertaken. So at this stage, that's probably about all I can say.
Can I just add to it, as not being government, I probably can just put a Trustmark view, which is Trustmark is very much plugged into the home upgrade grants with a view to actually recognising they have to be driven by PAS 2035 and whole house approach. They have to include quality, therefore I'm plugging Trustmark into that wherever we can. But they do also have to link to other government initiatives that we'll go through. So things like eco until 2028, mixed measures, all those different things. It has to be different moving forward.
Okay, just to finish off, I suppose the question must be on most people's lips, it's certainly on mine, is, are we ready? And if we're not ready, and I suspect we're not, is the answer, when do we absolutely have to be ready, and when will we be getting stuck into these sorts of volumes of high quality deep retrofits?
When you start on a journey, the most important step you take is the first one. And it's the most difficult step to take. We will get ready for this by starting on the journey, taking the first steps, thinking of it as a runway, a journey through time through which we grow demand and supply with the right end objective in mind and get it so that it takes off that runway and pays for itself without any government support or intervention, just like, say, the automotive industry does. I think that's how we get ready for it. I think we're more than ready for that first step now, and we're ready for the second and third as well. So let's take those and then move forward.
Simon, are you ready?
I was trying to avoid that one. Are we ready? If you asked me that question, I gave the honest answer at this moment, no. I think what we have seen in the last 12 to 18 months is a clear development process, a clear desire change. We have climate crisis, we have those. You know, the dinner conversation now is very much around climate. What can we do? How can we do things? So that momentum is creating a drive. That drive is creating knowledge around what we have to do. I think we now need to, and I think government will start supporting us in terms of making things happen around the training, the education, the qualification, the new technologies, so that we can deliver. And I think that's a gradual ramp up to a flat-out delivery.
And the last word to you, Sam.
I would say I agree with previous speakers. I think this is for us is about making sure that we ensure a kind of a smooth trajectory for growth here, that we don't run before we can walk. As you've seen, we are doing an awful lot of sort of demonstration and piloting to make sure we understand lessons and are able to feed that into the kind of the ramp up. We are trying to take a kind of a policy approach that focuses on both the kind of demand and supply. I think you could expect for us kind of a concerted focus on ensuring that the supply chain has the capability and skills to be able to respond so that it's able to meet that kind of demand as it kind of ramps up through the 2020s.
That's really reassuring. Good to hear. All that remains for me to do is to thank the speakers very much. If you could thank them in the time-honoured way, and thank you for your time.